Don't shut me out, please. I am begging you, just let me explain what happened that night.
I stood on my son Andrew's doorstep with a trembling hand clutching a letter I had rewritten 100 times but never had the courage to send. When he opened the door, his eyes were cold, colder than I had ever seen them. "You don't get to apologize after what you did," he said, his voice steady but sharp enough to cut through me. I tried to speak to explain the truth I had buried for 20 years, but he didn't let me. The door slammed in my face, just like it had all those years ago when I chose to lie to save him. He still believes I destroyed his life. He has no idea that I was trying to protect it. If this story moves you, take a moment to like and subscribe. It truly helps me share stories like this. And I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? And what would you have done if you were in my place? I didn't knock again after Andrew slammed the door. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the peeling paint near the frame, as if I had never seen it before. My hand was still raised in the air, fingers curled, slightly frozen, in a gesture that no longer had a purpose. The letter trembled against my palm, the paper soft, from how many times I had folded and unfolded it over the past week. For a long time, I couldn't move. The silence on his side of the door felt heavier than anything he had said. Eventually, I lowered my hand. I told myself I should leave with dignity, that at my age, I should know when not to beg. But the truth is, dignity has a way of slipping through your fingers when it's your child on the other side of that door. "Andrew," I whispered, even though I knew he wouldn't answer. There was no movement, no shadow under the door. Nothing. I turned slowly and walked down the steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. My knees ached, not just from age, but from the weight of everything I had carried for 20 years. When I reached the sidewalk, I paused again and looked back at the house. It was a beautiful place. Large windows, a carefully trimmed lawn. The kind of home I had always wanted for him, even when we barely had enough to keep the lights on. He had built a life for himself. A life that didn't include me. I pressed the letter against my chest for a moment, then slipped it back into my purse. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. But I also knew that forcing my way into his life wouldn't work. It never had. I walked to my car, an old sedan that had seen better days, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. My reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror, lined tired and older than I felt inside. "How did we get here?" I murmured, but I already knew the answer. We got here because of a lie I told 20 years ago, a lie I chose, and a lie I would choose again if it meant keeping him safe. The drive home felt longer than usual. The streets were familiar, same grocery store on the corner, same church where I used to take Andrew on Sundays, same park where he learned to ride his bike. Every place held a memory, and every memory felt like a quiet reminder of the life we had lost. Back then, it was just the two of us. After my husband passed away, everything changed overnight. One day, I was a wife with a partner, and the next, I was a single mother trying to hold together a life that felt like it was falling apart piece by piece. Andrew was only 8 when his father died. 8 years old, with eyes that were too big for his face and questions I didn't always know how to answer. "Is Dad coming back?" he asked me, once his voice small and hopeful. I remember kneeling in front of him, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, "but he'll always be with us." It was the kind of thing adults say to children when the truth is too heavy to carry. But even then, I wondered if I was already starting to lie. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house greeted me with the same quiet it always did. No footsteps, no voices, no laughter, just silence. I stepped inside and set my purse on the kitchen table. The chair across from me was empty, but I still found myself glancing at it as if Andrew might be sitting there waiting for dinner like he used to. He always liked his food simple. Mashed potatoes, chicken, nothing too fancy. "I don't trust fancy food," he used to say with a grin. I smiled faintly at the memory, then felt the smile fade just as quickly. I hadn't cooked for him in years. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the late afternoon light stretch across the yard. The letter in my purse seemed to call to me even from across the room. I knew what it said. Every word, every confession. But it didn't matter how carefully I had written it. If Andrew never read it, the truth would stay buried right where it had been for 2 decades, and maybe that's what he wanted. For a long time, Andrew believed something about me that wasn't true. He believed that I had destroyed the best thing that ever came into our lives after his father died. He believed that I had pushed away the one man who had tried to step in and care for us. He believed that I had chosen myself over him. The worst part, I let him believe it. I watched the way his eyes changed over time, how admiration turned into confusion, confusion into disappointment, and disappointment into something colder, something harder. Resentment. And I said nothing, because the truth would have been worse. The first time Andrew looked at me differently, I felt it in my bones. It was the night everything fell apart. He stood in the hallway just outside the living room, his small hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Why did you do that?" he asked me, his voice shaking. I remember the look on his face more than anything else. Not anger, not yet, just hurt. The kind that cuts deeper because it doesn't understand why it exists. "I had to," I told him. It was the only truth I allowed myself to give, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. A sudden knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I frowned slightly. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief, foolish second, my heart jumped. Andrew. I stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over my tea, and hurried to the door. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. But when I opened it, it wasn't him. It was the mail carrier. "Afternoon, Ms. Morrison," he said politely, handing me a small bundle of envelopes. "Oh, thank you," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment. I closed the door gently and looked down at the mail. Bills, flyers, and one envelope that stood out immediately. The handwriting was familiar. My breath caught. Carolyn. I hadn't heard from Carolyn Price in years, not since everything. I walked back to the table and sat down slowly, staring at the envelope as if it might disappear if I blinked too hard. Carolyn was the only person who had ever come close to knowing the truth. If she was writing to me now after all this time, it meant something had changed, something important, something I couldn't ignore. With shaking fingers, I slid the letter opener under the flap and carefully tore it open. The paper inside was crisp, the ink slightly smudged in places, as if it had been written in a hurry. I unfolded it and began to read, and as my eyes moved across the page, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. But it came tangled with something else. Fear. Because if Carolyn had finally found what we had been searching for back then. It meant the truth I had buried wasn't just waiting to be told. It was about to come back, and this time, I wouldn't be able to hide from it. I didn't sleep that night. Carolyn's letter lay open on the kitchen table, its edges curling slightly, as if it had already lived a life before reaching me. I must have read it 10 times, maybe more, tracing every word as though something might change if I looked hard enough. But it didn't. The truth remained exactly as it was waiting for me to finally face it, waiting for me to finally tell it. I sat there until the sky outside turned from deep blue to pale gray, my tea long gone cold, my hands still wrapped around the empty cup. The silence of the house pressed in around me, but this time it wasn't the kind I had grown used to. This silence felt alive, like something was about to break. Carolyn had always been the kind of person who didn't write unless it mattered. We had worked together at the hospital years ago, back when life still felt predictable. She was sharp, observant, and far more stubborn than I ever was. If she said she had found something, then she had, and that meant the past I had buried was no longer buried at all. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I let myself drift back. Back to a time before the lies. Back to when everything still felt simple. After my husband passed, the days blurred together in a way I can't fully explain. Grief has a strange way of rearranging time. It stretches moments you wish would end and erases the ones you desperately want to hold on to. I remember waking up one morning and realizing I didn't know how I was going to get through the day. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to do it alone. Andrew needed me. That was the only thing that kept me moving. He was quiet in those early months, quieter than any child should be. He would sit at the kitchen table swinging his legs back and forth, watching me as if I might disappear if he looked away. "Are you okay?" he asked me once. I should have been the one asking him that, but I nodded anyway. "Of course I am," I said, forcing a smile. "I've got you don't." He smiled back, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Looking back now, I think that was the first time I understood something important. Children always know more than we think. They just don't always have the words to say it. Looking back now, I think that was the first time I understood something important. Children always know more than we think. They just don't always have the words to say it. The first time I met Victor Hale, I didn't think anything of it. He came into the hospital late one evening, well-dressed, calm and polite, in a way that immediately put people at ease. I was finishing a shift, exhausted and distracted, when he stopped me in the hallway. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth. "I'm looking for the administrative office." I pointed him in the right direction, barely giving him a second glance. If someone had told me then how much that man would change my life, I would have walked the other way. It wasn't until weeks later that I saw him again. This time, it wasn't at the hospital. It was at the grocery store. I remember standing in the cereal aisle, comparing prices like I always did, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Small world," he said lightly. I turned surprised, and there he was, Victor Hale, smiling as if we were old friends. "Oh," I said, taken off guard. "You're the man from the hospital." He nodded. Guilty. There was something about him that made conversation easy. He asked about my day, about my work, about Andrew. Not in a way that felt intrusive, but in a way that felt attentive, present. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at me like that, like I mattered. At first, I kept my distance, not because I distrusted him, but because I didn't trust myself. Grief makes you vulnerable in ways you don't always recognize. It leaves cracks where things can slip in, things you might not have allowed before. But Victor was patient. He didn't push. He showed up. A coffee here, a casual conversation there. And slowly, without me even realizing it, he became part of our lives. Andrew liked him immediately. That should have been my first warning. Not because there was anything wrong with Andrew, but because he didn't open up to people easily. Not after losing his father. But with Victor, it was different. They laughed together, talked for hours, built things in the backyard. I remember standing at the kitchen window one afternoon watching them outside. Victor was showing Andrew how to fix something on his bike, his voice calm and steady, his movements confident. Andrew looked up at him with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. And something else. Something that made my chest tighten. Hope. Do you think he likes me? Andrew asked later that night, his voice hesitant. I looked at him surprised. Always hesitant. I looked at him surprised. Of course he does, I said. He hesitated, then added, Do you think he might stay? That question stayed with me longer than anything else, because I didn't know the answer. But part of me wanted it to be yes. Victor began coming around more often after that. Dinner at our place, weekends at the park. He fit into our lives so seamlessly that it almost felt like he had always been there. And for a while, I let myself believe that maybe this was how things were supposed to be. That maybe life was giving us a second chance, a way to rebuild what we had lost. But even then, there were moments, small ones, easy to dismiss if you weren't looking too closely. He would take phone calls in another room, disappear for hours without explanation, change the subject whenever I asked about his past. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Everyone has things they don't want to talk about. Everyone has a past. But something inside me, something quiet but persistent, kept whispering the same question. Why? The first time that whisper turned into something louder, I tried to ignore it. It was a Saturday afternoon. Andrew was in the backyard, and Victor had just stepped out to take a call. His phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. It buzzed once, then again. I didn't mean to look. I really didn't. But when it buzzed a third time, something in me gave in. I glanced down. The message on the screen was short. Too short. But it was enough. We need to talk. This isn't over. No name, no context, just those words. A chill ran through me, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Fear. I looked toward the window, watching Andrew laugh outside, completely unaware. Completely safe, at least for now. Victor came back inside a moment later, his expression calm, as if nothing had happened. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a smile. Yes, I said. But inside, something had shifted. Something that would change everything. Because that was the moment I realized I didn't know the man standing in my kitchen. Not really. And whatever he was hiding, it wasn't small. I didn't confront Victor that day. I wish I could say I was brave, that I looked him in the eye, demanded answers, and forced the truth out into the open. But that's not how it happened. Instead, I smiled. I nodded. I pretended everything was normal. Because the moment I saw that message on his phone, something deep inside me told me this wasn't something I could handle carelessly. Whatever Victor was hiding, it wasn't just a secret. It was something that could hurt us. That evening, we sat down for dinner, like we always did. Andrew was talking about school, his voice animated in a way that made my heart ache. He had been struggling for months after losing his father. But with Victor around, something in him had started to come back to life. He laughed more. He smiled more. He looked like a child again. And Victor sat across from him, listening closely, asking questions, encouraging him in that calm, steady tone that had become so familiar. You're getting better at that math, huh? Victor said, leaning back in his chair. Andrew grinned. Yeah, Mom helped me. Victor glanced at me, smiling. Well, you've got a good teacher. I forced a small smile in return, but inside, my thoughts were racing. Who are you? The question echoed in my mind over and over louder with every passing second. After dinner, Andrew went to his room to finish homework, and Victor stayed behind to help clean up. We worked side by side in silence for a few minutes, the sound of running water filling the space between us. I studied him carefully, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he seemed so. We worked side by side in silence for a few minutes, the sound of running water filling the space between us. I studied him carefully, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he seemed so composed, too composed. You seem distracted, he said suddenly, not looking at me. My hands froze on the dish I was holding. Just tired, I replied quickly. He nodded as if that answer satisfied him, but something about the way he said it so casually, so observantly, made my stomach tighten. It felt like he was watching me. Not just seeing me, watching. Later that night, after he left, I sat alone in the living room, replaying everything in my head. The message, his tone, the way he had noticed my distraction. It didn't add up, and the more I thought about it, the more certain I became of one thing: I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called in a favor. Carolyn answered on the second ring. Jeffrey, she said, surprised. It's been a while. I know. I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. There was a pause on the other end. What's wrong? I hesitated. How do you explain something like this without sounding paranoid? There's a man, I said slowly. He's been around Andrew and me for a few months now. His name is Victor Hale. Another pause. Longer this time. Why does that name sound familiar? Carolyn muttered. My grip tightened on the phone. That's what I need to find out. Carolyn had always had a way of getting information. Working in the hospital, she knew people who knew other people. Records, contacts, connections. If there was something to find, she could usually find it. I'll look into it, she said finally. But Jeffrey, be careful. I always am, I replied. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Because if I had always been careful, I wouldn't have let Victor get this close. Days passed, then a week. Victor continued coming around like nothing had changed. If anything, he seemed more attentive than before, more present, more involved. And that only made things worse, because the more normal he acted, the more abnormal everything felt. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, too quiet. Andrew, I called out. No answer. I stepped further inside, my heart beginning to beat faster. Then I heard voices. From the living room. I moved closer, my steps slow, careful. Victor's voice came first. You don't have to tell your mom everything, he was saying. My breath caught. Andrew's voice followed, uncertain. But she always asks. Victor chuckled softly. Parents do that. Doesn't mean you owe them every detail. I stood frozen in the hallway, my pulse pounding in my ears. Some things, Victor continued, his tone calm but firm, are better kept between us. Between us. The words hit me like a physical blow. Something inside me snapped. I stepped into the room, between who I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Both of them turned toward me. Andrew looked surprised. Victor didn't, not even a little. Jeffrey, he said smoothly, as if nothing was wrong. You're home early. I asked you a question, I said, my eyes locked on his. For a moment, the room felt impossibly small. Tense. Heavy. Victor smiled. That same calm, reassuring smile. Just talking, he said. Andrew was telling me about school. I looked at Andrew. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Is that true? I asked gently. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Something about the way he said it, too quick, too uncertain, made my chest tighten. Victor stepped forward slightly. You look upset, he said. Did something happen? I stared at him. Really stared. And for the first time since I had met him, I saw something beneath the surface. Not warmth, not kindness, but something colder, something calculated, and it terrified me. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands clasped tightly together, trying to steady my breathing. He's getting closer to Andrew. The thought repeated over and over in my mind. Closer than I ever intended, closer than I could allow. Whatever Victor was hiding, whatever Carolyn might find, it didn't matter anymore, because I had already seen enough to know that something was wrong, deeply wrong. The phone rang just after midnight. I grabbed it immediately. Carolyn, I whispered. Yes, she said, her voice tense. Jeffrey, I found something. My heart stopped. What is it? There was a pause, as if she was choosing her words carefully. Victor Hale isn't just someone with a vague past, she said slowly. He's been investigated before. My grip tightened. For what? Another pause, longer this time. And when she finally spoke, her voice was lower than I had ever heard it. Cases involving children. The room spun, my worst fear confirmed, and suddenly, everything became clear. Victor wasn't just hiding something. He was dangerous, and he was already inside my home. I didn't hang up immediately after Carolyn told me. I couldn't. My hand tightened around the phone so hard, my fingers began to ache, but I didn't notice. The only thing I could hear was the echo of her words repeating over and over in my head. Cases involving children? It didn't sound real. It didn't feel real, because if it were real, if it were true, then I had already made the biggest mistake of my life. I had let that man into my home, near my son. Jeffrey Carolyn's voice broke through my thoughts. Are you still there? Yes, I whispered, my throat dry. I'm here. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, she continued carefully. But I dug deeper. The records are incomplete. Some of them were sealed, others were dismissed. But there's a pattern. A pattern. The words sent a chill through me. What kind of pattern? I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know. Families, she said. Single mothers mostly. A child involved. He moves on before anything can stick. I closed my eyes. Single mothers, a child involved. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a method. And suddenly, everything about Victor, the charm, the patience, the way he had inserted himself into our lives, made terrifying sense. He hadn't found us by accident. He had chosen us. Jeffrey, you need to keep Andrew away from him, Carolyn said urgently. Right now. I know, I said, my voice shaking. I know. But knowing and doing were two very different things. Because Andrew didn't see what I saw. To him, Victor wasn't a threat. He was something else entirely. Something Andrew had been missing. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt different now. Every shadow darker. Every creak louder. as if the walls themselves were trying to tell me something I had ignored for too long. I stood up slowly and walked down the hallway to Andrew's room. The door was slightly open. He was inside, sitting on his bed, flipping through a book. Completely unaware. Completely safe. For now. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Hey, Mom." I stepped inside, forcing myself to stay calm. "How was your day?" "Good," he said with a small shrug. "Victor helped me with my project earlier." My heart tightened. "Did he?" I asked carefully. "Yeah," Andrew said, smiling faintly. "He's really good at explaining stuff." I nodded, trying to hide the storm building inside me. "Andrew, I need to talk to you about something." He frowned slightly. "What is it?" I hesitated. How do you tell a child that someone he trusts might be dangerous? How do you take that away from him without breaking something inside him? "It's about Victor," I said finally. The moment his name left my lips, Andrew's expression changed. Just slightly, but enough. "What about him?" he asked, his voice guarded. I took a step closer. "I don't think it's a good idea for him to come around anymore." The words felt heavy. Final. Andrew blinked. "What? Why?" I swallowed hard. "I just have a feeling," I said. Even as I said it, I hated how weak it sounded. A feeling. That's all I had. No proof, no evidence, just fear. And fear wasn't something a 10-year-old could understand the way I did. "That doesn't make sense," Andrew said, shaking his head. "He didn't do anything." "I know," I replied quickly. "But sometimes—" "You just don't like him," Andrew interrupted, his voice rising. "That's not true." "Then why are you doing this?" he demanded, standing up. "He's nice to us. He helps us. Makes things better." The words hit me harder than I expected, because he wasn't wrong. Victor had made things feel better, at least on the surface. "Andrew, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm your mother. I'm just trying to protect you." "From what?" he asked, frustration filling his eyes. "You won't even tell me what's wrong." "Because I can't. Because I don't have proof. Because if I'm wrong, I'll take away the one thing making you happy. Because if I'm right, I might not be able to fix what's already been done." "I just need you to trust me," I said softly. He stared at me for a long moment, and then slowly he shook his head. "I don't understand you," he said quietly. The disappointment in his voice cut deeper than any anger could have. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been ready to face. I was already losing him. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, every light on my mind racing through every possible scenario. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Something solid. Something undeniable. Because without it, I was just a paranoid mother pushing away someone her son trusted. And that would only push Andrew further away from me and closer to Victor. The next day, I called Carolyn again. "I need everything you can find," I told her. "Documents, names, anything. I'm already working on it." She replied, "But Jeffrey, this could take time." "I don't have time," I said sharply. There was a pause. "I'll do what I can," she said finally. Days turned into a blur of tension. I tried to keep Victor away, making excuses whenever he called or stopped by. But he was persistent. Too persistent. "You've been distant," he said one afternoon, his eyes studying me carefully. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I replied quickly. "I've just been busy." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe me, and that made me nervous. because if he realized I was pulling away, he might react. That evening, as I tucked Andrew into bed, he looked up at me with a question in his eyes. "Is Victor coming over tomorrow?" he asked. I hesitated. "No," I said gently. His face fell. "Why not?" That evening, as I tucked Andrew into bed, he looked up at me with a question in his eyes. "Is Victor coming over tomorrow?" he asked. I hesitated. "No," I said gently. His face fell. "Why not? Because I said so," I replied a little more firmly than I intended. He turned away from me, pulling the blanket up. "Good night, Mom." It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the distance behind them. I stood there for a moment, watching him. My son. My whole world. And I realized something with painful clarity. If I waited too long, if I hesitated, if I made the wrong move, I might not just lose his trust. I might lose him completely. And that's when I made a decision. A terrifying one. A decision that would change everything. If I couldn't prove the truth, then I would create a reason strong enough to tear Victor out of our lives, even if it meant destroying my own image in Andrew's eyes, even if it meant he would hate me. Because if the choice was between being hated and losing my son to a man like Victor Hale, I already knew what I would choose. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to do it. The house felt like it was going to collapsing enough to do it. The house felt suffocating that night, every corner, filled with the weight of a decision I could no longer avoid. I stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, my hands pressed flat against the counter, as if it were the only thing holding me upright. If I waited for proof, it might be too late. If I acted without it, I could destroy everything. But there was one truth I couldn't ignore. Victor Hale was a danger to my son, and I was the only one who could stop him. The next time Victor came over, I was ready. Or at least, I told myself I was. Andrew had invited him without asking me something that would have angered me under normal circumstances. But now, it only confirmed what I feared. Victor wasn't just part of our lives anymore. He was becoming central to Andrew's world. I heard the door open and Andrew's voice calling out, "Mom, Victor's here!" My heart pounded. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and forced myself to walk into the living room. Victor stood there relaxed as ever, his coat draped over his arm, that familiar, easy smile on his face. "Jeffrey," he said warmly. "Good to see you." I studied him carefully. Same calm posture, same steady eyes, same man who had been slowly weaving himself into our lives. And yet now I saw him differently. Like a mask had slipped, even if only for me. "We need to talk," I said. Andrew looked between us confused. About what Victor asked smoothly. Alone, I added my tone firm. Andrew hesitated. "It's okay," Victor said gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Go finish your homework. I'll be here." Andrew nodded reluctantly and walked down the hall. The moment he disappeared, the air in the room changed. The warmth vanished. The politeness faded. And for the first time, it was just the two of us. I didn't sit down. Neither did he. We stood facing each other a few feet apart, like strangers who had finally dropped the act. "I know about your past," I said. I expected him to react, to deny it, to argue, to show something. But he didn't. Instead, he tilted his head slightly as if considering my words. "Do you?" he asked calmly. The lack of surprise made my stomach twist. "I know enough," I said. Enough to know you shouldn't be anywhere near my son. There it was, out in the open, a line drawn. Victor exhaled slowly, almost like he was disappointed. I wondered when you'd start asking questions, he said. My heart skipped. You're not even going to deny it? I asked. He smiled faintly. Deny what exactly? The way he said it, so precise, so controlled, made my skin crawl. You know what I snapped. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, something darker. You don't have proof, he said quietly. The words landed like a weight on my chest, because he was right. I didn't. You think that matters? I shot back. It matters to Andrew, he replied instantly. Silence fell between us, and in that silence I realized something terrifying. He understood the situation perfectly. He knew exactly where I stood, and exactly how powerless I was. You should leave, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay strong. He didn't move. You're upset, he said calmly. I understand that, but you're making assumptions. Leave, I repeated. Still, he didn't move. Instead, he took a small step closer. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to make my breath catch. You're going to push him away, he said softly. My chest tightened. What? Andrew, he clarified. If you do this, if you force me out without a reason, he understands you're not protecting him. His voice lowered slightly. You're isolating him. The words hit harder than I expected, because they carried a dangerous truth. Andrew didn't see Victor the way I did. To him, Victor wasn't a threat. He was support, stability, something he had been missing since his father died. You don't get to talk about him like that, I said, my voice sharper now. Victor's expression didn't change. But it's true, he replied. I shook my head, anger rising. You're manipulating him, I said. I've seen it. For the first time, his smile faded completely, and what replaced it was something colder, something real. Be careful with your accusations, he said quietly. A chill ran through me. There it was, the threat. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. I straightened my shoulders. I don't care what you think, I said. You're not coming back here again. He held my gaze for a long moment, and then slowly he nodded. All right, he said. Just like that. No argument, no resistance, just agreement. It should have made me feel relieved, but it didn't, because something about it felt wrong. Too easy. Victor picked up his coat and walked toward the door. Before he left, he paused. Andrew won't understand this, he said without turning around. I know, I replied, and when he asks why, he continued glancing back at me. What will you tell him? I didn't answer. Because I didn't have one, not a real one, not one that would make sense to Andrew. Victor studied me for a second longer. Then he opened the door and stepped outside. And just like that, he was gone. For a moment, I stood there in silence, waiting, listening, half expecting him to come back. But he didn't. I had done it. I had pushed him out. Mom, Andrew's voice broke through the stillness. He stepped into the room looking around. Where's Victor? I swallowed hard. He's not coming back, I said. The words felt heavier than anything I had ever said. Andrew froze. What do you mean I mean exactly that? I replied. Why, he demanded, his voice rising. What happened? I opened my mouth, and then closed it again, because I couldn't tell him the truth, not without proof. not without destroying everything in a way I couldn't control. I don't want him here anymore, I said finally. That's not a reason, Andrew shouted. It's enough, I said firmly. He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. No, he said, shaking his head. No, it's not. The anger came fast, sharp, explosive. You always do this, he snapped. You just decide things and don't explain anything? That is not fair, I said. Then explain it, he shot back. I couldn't, and he knew it. That was the worst part. You're ruining everything, Andrew said, his voice breaking. The words hit me like a blow. I'm trying to protect you, I whispered. From what he yelled. I had no answer, not one I could give him. Andrew stepped back, shaking his head. I don't understand you, he said again. But this time, there was something else in his voice. Something colder. Something that hadn't been there before. I don't think I trust you anymore. The room went silent. And in that moment, I realized the cost of what I had just done. I had saved him from Victor, but I had lost something else. Something just as important, his trust. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, because the hardest part wasn't pushing Victor away. It was living with the consequences of the lie I was about to tell. The silence between Andrew and me lasted for days. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful or calm, but the kind that stretches across a room like a wall you can't see but feel every second you're near it. Every word we exchanged became short, careful, almost rehearsed. Conversations turned into necessities, not connections. Dinner's ready. Okay. How was school? Fine. That was all. No laughter, no stories, no warmth. And every time I looked at him, I could feel it. The distance growing wider, deeper, harder to cross. I had chosen to protect him. But in doing so, I had begun to lose him. Andrew stopped asking about Victor after the third day. At first, that should have been a relief. But it wasn't. Because I knew my son. And silence didn't mean acceptance. It meant something else. It meant he was thinking, questioning, doubting me. One evening as I stood at the sink washing dishes, I felt his presence behind me. I turned slightly. Andrew was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Can I ask you something? He said. My chest tightened. Of course. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, Did Victor do something bad? The question hit me harder than I expected, because it was exactly what I had been trying to avoid. I dried my hands, slowly buying time. Why would you ask that? I said carefully. He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Because people don't just disappear like that, he said. Not unless something's wrong. He was smarter than I had given him credit for, and that made this even harder. I told you, I said gently. I just don't think it's a good idea for him to be around anymore. That's not the same thing, Andrew replied. He stepped closer. Did he hurt someone? The word hung in the air between us. Hurt. My heart pounded. I could feel the truth pressing against my chest, desperate to escape. But I couldn't let it out. Not like this. Not without proof. I don't know, I said finally. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Andrew studied me for a long moment, and then slowly he nodded. Okay, he said, just one word. quiet, flat. But behind it, I could feel something shifting, something breaking. That night I heard him crying, softly, trying to hide it. But I heard it anyway, and I sat in my room, my hands clenched into fists, fighting the urge to go to him. Because I knew if I did, I might tell him everything. And if I told him everything, I might not be able to protect him anymore. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of the front door closing. My heart jumped. I rushed out of my room, my feet hitting the floor harder than I intended. "Andrew!" I called. No answer. I reached the living room just in time to see the door swing shut. He was gone. Panic hit me instantly. I grabbed my keys without thinking and ran outside. "Andrew!" I shouted, scanning the street. Nothing. No sign of him. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Where would he go? Who would he turn to? And then it hit me. "Victor!" "No," I whispered, shaking my head. But deep down, I already knew. I jumped into my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I pulled out of the driveway faster than I ever had before. "Please don't let him be there," I muttered under my breath. But my instincts told me otherwise. Andrew trusted him. More than me, and if he wanted answers, that's exactly where he would go. Victor's apartment wasn't far. Wasn't. I had been there once before, back when everything still felt normal. Back when I believed he was someone we could trust. Now, as I pulled into the parking lot, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I scanned the area, and then I saw it. Andrew's bike, leaning against the railing outside the B building. My breath caught. He was here. Heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I scanned the area, and then I saw it. Andrew's bike, leaning against the railing outside the building. My breath caught. He was here. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Up the stairs. Down the hallway. My footsteps echoed as I reached Victor's door. I didn't knock. I pounded. "Andrew!" I shouted. "Open the door!" There was a pause. Just a second. But it felt like forever. And then, the door opened. Andrew stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide. Behind him, Victor. Calm. Still. Watching. "Mom," Andrew whispered. I grabbed his arm, immediately pulling him toward me. "We're leaving," I said. What he protested? "I just got here." "We're leaving," I repeated, my voice firm. Victor stepped forward slightly. "You're scaring him," he said quietly. I turned to him, my anger flaring. "Stay away from him," I snapped. Andrew looked between us, confused. "What's looked between us, confused? What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," Victor said calmly. "Your mother is just..." "Don't I cut him off?" My voice shook, but I didn't car. "Don't pretend like this is normal." "Owing on?" he asked. "Nothing," Victor said calmly. "Your mother is just..." "Don't I cut him off?" My voice shook, but I didn't care. "Don't pretend like this is normal." For the first time, Andrew pulled his arm away from me. "Stop it," he said, his voice breaking. "Both of you." The room fell silent, and in that silence, I saw it, the fear in his eyes. "Not of Victor, of me. I just wanted answers," Andrew said, his voice trembling. "You won't tell me anything. You just keep shutting me out." My chest tightened. "I'm trying to protect you," I said softly, from what he demanded. I looked at Victor. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, waiting. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wanted this. He wanted Andrew to doubt me, to turn against me, because the more distance between us, the more control he had. I took a step forward. "Andrew, listen to me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to go. Now." He hesitated, just for a second, and that second felt like everything, because I didn't know which way he would choose. Me or him? Victor finally spoke. "Maybe you should tell him the truth," he said softly. The words hit me like a knife. My breath caught, because he knew. He knew I couldn't, and he was using it against me. Andrew looked at me, waiting, hoping. "Mom," he whispered, "please." The room closed in around me. The truth pressed against my lips. But I couldn't say it. Not yet. Not without proof. Not without risking everything. "I can't," I said quietly. And in that moment, I saw it. The exact second his heart broke. Andrew stepped back, away from me, toward Victor, and my world tilted. Because I had done everything to protect him. Everything. And still, I was losing him. Andrew didn't come home with me that day. That was the moment everything truly changed. I remember standing there in Victor's apartment, my hand still slightly raised, as if I could somehow reach across the distance that had just opened between me and my son. But the space wasn't physical anymore. It was something else. Something deeper. Something I didn't know how to fix. "Andrew," I said again, softer this time, trying to steady my voice. "Please, come home." He didn't move. He stood near Victor, not touching him, not hiding behind him, but close enough that the message was clear. He wasn't choosing me. At least, not right now. "I just want to understand," he said quietly. The words weren't angry. That was what hurt the most. They were tired, confused, and full of a kind of pain I had caused. "I know," I whispered. "I know you do." "Then tell me," he said. I looked at him, really looked. At the boy I had raised. The boy I had protected. The boy I had just lost a piece of. And I realized something unbearable. If I told him the truth right now, I might save him. But I might also destroy something in him that could never be repaired. And worse, if I was wrong, I would be the one who had taken away the only stability he had left. "I can't," I said again, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just the truth of my limitation. Andrew's shoulders dropped, not dramatically, not in anger, but slowly, like something inside him had finally given up. "Then I'm staying," he said. The words were quiet, final. My heart broke in a way I didn't think was still possible. I left that apartment alone. I don't remember walking down the stairs. I don't remember getting into my car. All I remember is the feeling. That hollow, sinking feeling in my chest. The kind that makes it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to believe anything will ever be okay again. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. Not just quiet, not just still. Empty. Like something essential had been removed from it. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the space where Andrew's shoes usually sat. One sneaker was still there, tilted slightly to the side, as if he had kicked it off in a hurry. He hadn't planned to leave. Not really. That thought made it worse, because it meant I had pushed him to this point. I walked slowly through the house, touching things without realizing it. The back of a chair, the edge of the counter, the frame of a photograph. In that photo, Andrew was 8 years old, smiling up at me with a gap between his front teeth. That was right after his father died, back when everything felt broken. But we still had each other. I picked up the frame, my fingers trembling. "I'm trying," I whispered. But there was no one there to hear me. The phone rang just as I set the photo back down. I jumped slightly, my heart already racing. "Hello," I answered quickly. Jeffrey Carolyn's voice came through urgent. "I need to see you. Now." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" I asked. "I found more," she said. "More than I expected." My grip on the phone tightened. How bad? There was a pause. Too long. "Bad enough that you were right to be scared," she said finally. A chill ran through me. "I'll be there," I said immediately. Carolyn's apartment was across town. The drive felt like hours, even though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Every red light felt like an obstacle, every second stretched thin by the weight of what I might be about to learn. When I arrived, she opened the door before I even knocked. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "I feel worse," I replied. She stepped aside, letting me in. Her living room was covered in papers, files, printouts, photographs. The sight alone made my chest tighten. "This is everything I could find," she said, gesturing to the table. "And it's not good." I moved closer slowly, my eyes scanning the documents, names, dates, locations, and then a photo. I froze. Victor. Younger, but unmistakably him. Standing outside a house I didn't recognize. "With another family," Carolyn said quietly. I swallowed hard. "How many?" I asked. She hesitated. "At least 3, she said. That I could confirm." My knees felt weak. 3. 3 families, 3 children. And the cases I asked. "Never proven," she replied. "But always the same pattern. He gets close, gains trust. Then something happens." What kind of something? I pressed. Carolyn looked at me carefully. "Enough to leave damage behind," she said. My heart pounded. "And then he disappears," she said, "before anything sticks." I closed my eyes. Andrew, my son, was just another pattern. "He's careful," Carolyn continued. "Very careful. No direct evidence. No clear trail. But Jeffrey, this isn't coincidence." I nodded slowly. "I know, because I had felt it, seen it, even before I had proof." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I didn't know. I thought about Andrew, about the look in his eyes when I couldn't give him answers, about the way he stepped back from me, about the way he chose to stay. And I realized something that made my chest tighten. Victor wasn't just a threat. He was already winning. "I need to bring Andrew home," I said finally. Carolyn nodded. "Yes, but you can't just walk in there and demand it. Not anymore." "I know," I said quietly. Then, what she asked. I looked down at the papers again, at the evidence, at the truth I had been afraid to face. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not hesitation, something else, something stronger. Resolve. At the truth I had been afraid to face. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not hesitation, something else, something stronger. Resolve. I'm done waiting, I said. Carolyn raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to protect Andrew quietly anymore, I replied. My voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in days. Victor thinks I won't act without proof, I continued. He thinks I'll stay silent because I'm afraid of being wrong. Carolyn crossed her arms. And are you? I shook my head. No. Because at this point, being wrong didn't matter anymore, not compared to what could happen if I was right. I looked back at the photo of Victor, at the calm expression, the carefully crafted mask, and I felt something rise inside me, a kind of anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. You don't get to take my son, I whispered. Not again. Not from me. Because this time, I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to stay silent, and I wasn't going to let him win. I didn't go back to Victor's apartment that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I couldn't walk in there again without a plan. The last time I had gone in with fear and instinct. This time, I needed something stronger. I needed control. Back at home, I spread everything Carolyn had given me across the kitchen table. Photos, names, addresses, fragments of other people's lives. People who had unknowingly crossed paths with the same man now standing between me and my son, Victor Hale. I stared at his face in each photograph, searching for something different, something that would make him easier to understand. But there was nothing. He looked the same in every picture, calm, composed, safe. That was the most dangerous part. I picked up one of the files Carolyn had highlighted. A family in Ohio, single mother, one son. Victor had entered their lives the same way he had entered ours, slowly, carefully, patiently, helping, supporting, earning trust. And then something had happened. The details were unclear, but the outcome wasn't. The mother had reported concerns. The case had gone nowhere. Victor had disappeared, and the boy had withdrawn, changed. Something inside him had been damaged, not proven, not documented clearly, but real. I could feel it just reading the lines. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Not Andrew, not my son. I pressed my hands against the table, forcing myself to breathe. Panic wouldn't help me now. Fear wouldn't bring him back. I needed to think, like a mother, but also like someone who understood how people like Victor worked. The next morning, I called Andrew's school. Hi, this is Jeffrey Morrison, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just wanted to confirm Andrew hasn't been in today, has he? There was a pause as the receptionist checked. No, ma'am, she replied. He hasn't been here. My heart sank. Thank you, I said quietly before hanging up. That confirmed it. He hadn't just stayed overnight. He had chosen to stay. I drove past Victor's apartment again later that morning. Not to go inside, just to watch. From across the street, I sat in my car, my fingers gripping the steering wheel as I stared at the building. Every person who walked in or out made my chest tighten. Every shadow behind the windows made my imagination spiral. And then I saw him. Andrew. He stepped outside slowly, his hands in his pockets, his head slightly lowered. He looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like something inside him was heavy. Victor followed a moment later, placing a hand lightly on Andrew's shoulder, guiding him, not forcefully, but deliberately. My stomach twisted. That wasn't kindness. That was control. I stepped out of the car before I could stop myself. "Andrew!" I called. Both of them turned. Andrew's eyes widened in surprise. Victor's expression didn't change. "Mom," Andrew said, uncertain. I walked toward them, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said. Victor didn't move, didn't interrupt. He just watched, always watching. "I called your school," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You didn't go." Andrew looked down. "I didn't feel LGO." Andrew looked down. "I didn't feel like it." "That's not like you," I replied. He shrugged. "Maybe I'm changing." The words stung more than I expected, because I knew why he was changing and who was behind it. "I get." "That's not like you," I replied. He shrugged. "Maybe I'm changing." The words stung more than I expected, because I knew why he was changing and who was behind it. "Come home," I said softly. He hesitated. "I don't know if I can," he admitted. My chest tightened. "Why not?" He looked at me, really looked, and I saw it again. That doubt, that distance. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You keep asking me to trust you, but you won't trust me with the truth." The words hit me hard, because they were fair, painfully fair. "I'm not hiding it from you to hurt you," I said. "Then why?" he pressed. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because even now, even standing right in front of him, I still couldn't say it. Victor finally stepped forward, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to insert himself into the space between us. "You're putting him in an impossible position," he said calmly. I turned on him instantly. "You don't get to speak for him," I snapped. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm observing." I felt my anger rise, because that's exactly what he did. He observed. He studied. He waited. "Andrew," I said, ignoring Victor, "you need to come with me. Now." My voice was firmer this time, less pleading, more certain. Andrew flinched slightly. "I can't just leave," he said. "Why not?" He hesitated, and then quietly he said something that made my entire body go cold. "Because he understands me." The world seemed to tilt. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Excuse me?" I whispered. Andrew looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. "Victor listens," he said. "He doesn't just tell me what to do. He explains things. He treats me like I matter." Each word felt like a blade, because I had spent my whole life trying to do exactly that, and somehow I had failed. "I have always tried to protect you," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay strong. "I know," Andrew replied. And then he added softly, "But maybe I don't need protection as much as I need honesty." Silence fell between us, and in that silence I realized something devastating. Victor didn't need to turn Andrew against me. I had done that myself. Every time I held back the truth. Every time I said, "Trust me," without giving him a reason. Every time I chose fear over honesty. I took a step back. Just one. But it felt like a distance I might never recover from. "Okay," I said quietly. Both of them looked at me surprised. I understand, I continued. Andrew frowned. What do you mean? I swallowed hard. It means I'm done asking you to trust me blindly. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Just for a second, but I saw it. He didn't like that. I'm going to tell you everything, I said. Andrew's breath caught. What? Everything, I repeated. No more half-truths. No more silence. My heart pounded, because this was it. The moment I had been avoiding. The moment that could either save my son or destroy what little was left between us. But not here, I added, glancing at Victor. Andrew followed my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. A flicker of doubt, small, but real. Why not here? Andrew asked. Because some truths, I said slowly, don't belong in front of people who have something to hide. The air changed. Victor didn't move, didn't react, but the tension around us tightened like a wire pulled too far. Andrew looked between us, confused, uncertain, torn. And in that moment, I knew. The next thing I said, the truth I was about to reveal, would change everything. Andrew didn't answer me right away. He stood there, caught between us, his eyes moving from my face to Victor's and back again, as if trying to decide which version of reality made more sense. The version where I was protecting him, or the version where I was hiding something. Mom, he said quietly, his voice uncertain. What are you talking about? I took a slow breath. This was it. No more holding back, no more protecting him from the truth, even if the truth broke something between us. I'm talking about him, I said, my eyes fixed on Victor, and what he's done before he ever met us. Victor didn't flinch, but something in his posture changed, just slightly, tighter, more alert. Good. That meant I was finally stepping into ground he didn't control. Andrew frowned. What do you mean? I stepped closer to him, careful not to reach out too quickly. I mean that Victor has done this before, I said, with other families, other kids. Andrew's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. That's not true, he said immediately. Of course it wasn't, not to him, because everything Victor had shown him had been kind, careful, supportive. That's what I thought too, I said softly. At first, Victor finally spoke. You're making serious accusations. He said, his tone calm but edged. Do you have proof I didn't look at him? Not yet. Because this moment wasn't about him. It was about Andrew. I have enough, I said. That wasn't entirely true, but it was stronger than saying I had nothing. And right now, I needed strength. Andrew shook his head. You're just saying things because you don't like him, he said, his voice rising again. No, I said firmly. I'm saying things because I found out who he really is. Then tell me, Andrew snapped. Tell me exactly what he did. The words hit hard, because I didn't have an answer that would satisfy him. Not one that was clean, not one that was proven, only fragments, patterns, fear, and instinct. He gets close to families like ours, I said slowly. Single parents, kids who are hurting, kids who need someone to listen. Andrew's face tightened. That doesn't mean anything. It does when it keeps happening, I said. Victor exhaled softly, shaking his head. This is speculation, he said. You're building a story out of incomplete information. I turned to him then. Finally. You've been investigated, I said. That got his attention. Not a visible reaction, but something shifted behind his eyes. "You've been reported," I continued, "more than once." Andrew looked at him, waiting, searching for denial, for reassurance. Victor met his gaze calmly. "People make accusations all the time," he said, "especially when they don't understand something." The answer was smooth, practiced, too practiced. "Then explain it," I said sharply. Silence fell. For the first time, Victor didn't immediately respond, and in that silence, I saw it. A crack. Small, but real. "Explain why you've been in multiple households with the same pattern," I continued. "Explain why you always leave before anything is resolved. Explain why those kids—" "Enough," Victor said quietly. The word wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Andrew flinched slightly. So did I, because there it was again. That shift. That subtle loss of control. "You're crossing a line," Victor said, his voice lower now. "And you crossed it first," I replied. For a moment, the air felt electric, tense, unstable, like something could snap at any second. Andrew stepped between us. "Stop it," he said, his voice shaking. "Both of you." We fell silent, and once again, it came back to him. Always him. "I don't know who to believe," Andrew said, his voice breaking. "Mom, you won't tell me everything. And Victor?" He turned to him. "You're not even defending yourself properly." Victor's expression softened instantly. That same careful, controlled kindness returning like a mask, snapping back into place. "I don't need to defend myself against something that isn't true," he said gently. Andrew looked at me, waiting, hoping I would counter that I would finally give him something solid, something undeniable. And for the first time I did. "I lied," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Andrew blinked. "What I lied to you?" I repeated, my voice quieter now. "A long time ago." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. He hadn't expected that. Good. Because neither had Andrew. "What are you talking about?" Andrew asked. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as I stepped into the truth I had buried for years. "About your father," I said. The moment the words left my mouth, everything shifted. The tension changed. The focus moved. And suddenly, Victor wasn't at the center anymore. I was. Andrew stared at me, confusion flooding his face. "What about Dad?" he asked. I felt my hands begin to tremble. This was the part I had never wanted to face, never wanted to explain, because it meant exposing a truth that would change how Andrew saw everything, including me. "Your father didn't die the way I told you," I said. The silence that followed was suffocating. Andrew's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" he whispered. I took a deep breath. "He didn't just get sick," I said. "There was more to it." Victor was watching me closely now. Very closely. Because whatever this was, it wasn't part of his plan. Andrew shook his head RT of his plan. Andrew shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "No, you told me everything. You said I told you what I thought you could handle." I interrupted gently. His breathing quickened. "What are you saying?" he asked. I closed my eyes for a second, and then I said the words I had carried for years. "Your father was involved in something dangerous," I said. "Something that put us at risk." Andrew stepped back. "What kind of dangerous?" I hesitated, just for a moment, but then I pushed through it. "He was being investigated," I said, "for financial crimes. Fraud. People were looking for him. The truth hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Andrew's face went pale. "That's not true," he said. "I wish it wasn't," I replied. "And his death?" I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "Wasn't just an accident. It was connected to all of that." Andrew shook his head again. No, you're lying. I lied before I said, not now." The words hurt more than anything I had said so far, because this time I wasn't protecting him. I was tearing down the version of reality he had built his entire life around. "Why would you tell me this now?" he asked, his voice trembling. I looked at him, really looked. "Because I've been trying to protect you from the truth your whole life," I said. "And it's the same thing I'm doing now." His eyes filled with tears. "What does that have to do with Victor?" he asked. I turned slightly, just enough for him to follow my gaze. "Because I've seen this before," I said quietly. "The way someone can enter your life, earn your trust, and hide something dangerous behind it." Victor's jaw tightened, just slightly, but I saw it. "I'm not your father," Victor said sharply. "No," I replied, "but you're hiding something just the same." The air thickened a ga in, the balance shifting once more. "I'm not your father," Victor said sharply. "No," I replied, "but you're hiding something just the same." The air thickened again, the balance shifting once more. Andrew stood between us, breathing hard, eyes wide, heart caught between two truths. And for the first time since this started, he wasn't just looking at me with doubt. He was looking at Victor the same way. "What aren't you telling me?" Andrew asked him. The question was soft, but it carried everything. Victor didn't answer immediately, and that silence said more than anything else could have. In that moment, I knew. The truth hadn't fixed everything. It hadn't healed us. But it had done one thing. It had broken Victor's hold. Just enough. And now, the real fight was about to begin. Victor didn't answer Andrew's question. That was the first real crack. Not the kind that shatters everything at once, but the kind that spreads slowly, quietly, until one day the whole surface collapses under its own weight. "What aren't you telling me?" Andrew had asked. And for the first time since this began, Victor hesitated. It was subtle, barely noticeable. But I saw it. And more importantly, Andrew saw it too. "Andrew," Victor said, finally, his voice soft, controlled. "There are things your mother is saying that aren't accurate. She's upset. She's trying to make sense of things that don't need to be complicated." That was his tactic. Minimize, deflect, reframe. I had seen it before, but now Andrew was looking at him differently. Not with full trust, not with blind belief, but with questions. "That's not what I asked," Andrew said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, stronger than I had heard it in days. "I asked what you're not telling me." Victor held his gaze, and for a second, the mask slipped again. "You're asking the wrong question," Victor said. "No," Andrew replied. "I'm asking the only one that matters." My chest tightened. Because that was my son. The boy who had been confused, hurt, pulled in two directions, and was now finally standing still long enough to think for himself. I didn't interrupt, didn't push, didn't try to control the moment, because for the first time, this wasn't about me convincing him. This was about him seeing. Victor exhaled slowly. "You want to know everything he asked. Andrew nodded. Yes. Victor glanced at me. Just for a second. And in that glance, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not control, not confidence. Calculation. All right, Victor said. The words sent a quiet chill through me, because it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like strategy. I've worked with families before, he said. That part is true. Andrew's eyes flickered. With kids like you, Victor continued. Kids who've been through something difficult. Loss. Confusion. Change. He wasn't lying. That was the dangerous part. He was telling just enough truth to make everything else believable. Sometimes those situations don't end well, he added. Not because of me, but because people don't always want to face what's really going on. Andrew frowned. What does that mean? Victor stepped a little closer. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to close the distance. It means your mother isn't the It means your mother isn't the only one who hides things, he said quietly. My heart dropped. There it was. The shift. The redirection. He wasn't defending himself. He was turning the spotlight back on me. Only one who hides things, he said quietly. My heart dropped. There it was. The shift. The redirection. He wasn't defending himself. He was turning the spotlight back on me. That's not fair, I said sharply. But Andrew was already looking at me again. Conflicted. What is he talking about? He asked. I took a step forward. He's trying to confuse you, I said. No, Victor replied calmly. I'm trying to give him the full picture. Andrew's breathing quickened. What full picture? I took a step forward. He's trying to confuse you, I said. No, Victor replied calmly. I'm trying to give him the full picture. Andrew's breathing quickened. What full picture? Victor didn't look at me this time. He kept his eyes on Andrew. The kind where people don't just lie once, he said. They lie because they're afraid of what the truth will reveal. Each word was deliberate, carefully placed, designed to sound reasonable, to sound honest, but I could feel it, the manipulation beneath it. Stop, I said. But Andrew shook his head. No, he said. Let him talk. The words hit me harder than anything else. Because once again, he was choosing to listen to Victor. Your mother didn't just lie about your father, Victor continued. She lied about what it meant for you. Andrew's face tightened. What do you mean? I stepped closer, my voice urgent now. Andrew, don't let him finish, Andrew said, not looking at me. My chest ached, because I knew exactly what Victor was doing. He wasn't just defending himself. He was reshaping Andrew's understanding of me. When someone hides the truth, Victor said it's usually because that truth affects more than just the past. Andrew's eyes widened slightly. What does that mean? He asked again. Victor tilted his head slightly. It means your father's situation didn't end when he died. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Everything shifted. Again, that's not... I started. But I stopped. Because I couldn't say it. Not yet. Not without explaining everything. And I wasn't ready. Not like this. Andrew turned to me slowly. Mom, what is he talking about? His voice wasn't angry this time. It was something worse. Afraid. I felt my throat tighten. Because the truth was bigger than what I had already told him. And I had been hoping, praying that I wouldn't have to go that far. Jeffrey, Victor said quietly, finally looking at me again. If you want him to trust you, now would be a good time. The challenge was clear. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Victor wasn't just manipulating Andrew. He was forcing me into a corner where the only way out was to reveal everything. I closed my eyes for a moment. Just a second. Because once I said it, there would be no going back. Andrew, I said softly. He looked at me immediately, waiting, holding his breath. There's more, I admitted. The words felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. More than what I told you about your father. Andrew swallowed hard. What more? I opened my eyes, and I told him the truth I had buried for years. The people who were looking for your father, I said slowly, they didn't stop when he died. The silence that followed was absolute, complete, unforgiving. Andrew's face went pale. What do you mean they didn't stop? He asked. I forced myself to keep going. Because some of the money, some of what he was involved in, I hesitated, then pushed through. It was never recovered. Andrew took a step back. And they believed someone close to him might know where it was, I said. His eyes widened. Who? I swallowed. Me, I said. The truth hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable, and in that moment, everything changed. I didn't know anything, I said quickly. Not then, not now, but that didn't matter to them. Andrew stared at me. So, all this time? Yes, I said. I've been trying to keep you safe from that. His breathing grew uneven. And Victor? He asked. I looked at him, then at Victor, and finally I said the words I had been too afraid to say before. I think he's connected to it. Silence, total, shocking. Victor didn't deny it immediately, and that was the loudest answer of all. Andrew turned slowly toward him. His voice barely a whisper. Is that true? Victor held his gaze, calm, measured, unreadable, and for the first time since all of this began, I saw something I had been waiting for. Fear. Not in Victor, in Andrew, because now he understood what was really at stake, and the truth was no longer something I could protect him from. Is that true? Andrew's voice barely existed when he asked it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disbelief anymore. It was something quieter, something more fragile. Fear. Real fear. The kind that settles deep in your chest when you realize the world you thought you understood might not be real at all. Victor didn't answer immediately. That silence stretched longer than anything that had come before it. Long enough for Andrew to notice. Long enough for doubt to take root. And once doubt appears, it doesn't leave easily. I think Victor said, finally his voice slow and controlled, that your mother is trying to connect things that aren't actually connected. It sounded reasonable, measured, but not like a denial. Not like a simple, clear no. Andrew noticed that too. Are you connected to it or not? He asked again, his voice slightly stronger now. Victor's jaw tightened. Just a fraction, but I saw it. He's asking you a simple question, I said quietly. Victor didn't look at me. He kept his focus on Andrew. That situation happened years ago, he said. Whatever your father was involved in, it doesn't have anything to do with me. Again, not a denial, a deflection. Andrew's breathing became uneven. That's not what I asked, he said, His hands were shaking now. You didn't answer me. Victor's calm started to slip. Not completely, but enough. I'm telling you that your mother is creating a connection that doesn't exist, he replied. Andrew stepped back. Another step. Creating distance. Not from me this time. From him. Then why won't you just say no? Andrew asked. The question cut through everything. Sharp, direct, unavoidable. Victor's eyes flickered. And for the first time, he didn't have an immediate response. That was all it took. Andrew looked at me, then back at Victor, and I saw it happen. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The trust. Breaking. You told me you always tell the truth, Andrew said quietly. Victor's expression softened again, trying to regain control. I do, he said. Then why won't you answer me? Andrew pressed. Victor took a breath, and for a second, I thought he might finally say it, finally admit something, anything, but instead, You're overwhelmed right now, he said. Both of you are. This isn't the time to... Stop, Andrew said. The word came out stronger than anything he had said before. Firm, clear, and final. Don't do that, Andrew continued. Don't talk around it. Don't try to make this about something else. He shook his head slowly. I just want the truth. Silence, heavy, thick, unavoidable. Victor looked at him. Really looked. And something changed. Not in his words, not yet, but in his eyes. The calm wasn't there anymore. The control was slipping. You're asking questions that don't have simple answers, Victor said. Andrew's face hardened. Yes, they do. And then he asked the question that broke everything. Did you come into my life because of my dad? Time seemed to stop. My heart stopped with it. Because that was it. That was the question I had been too afraid to ask out loud. The one I had danced around, avoided, protected him from. And now he had said it himself. Victor didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. And in that silence, Andrew got his answer. No. Andrew whispered, shaking his head slowly. He took another step back, away from Victor, closer to me. Not fully, not yet, but closer. You knew, Andrew said, his voice cracking. Didn't you? Victor finally exhaled. A slow breath, the kind you take when you realize something is over. I didn't approach you the way she's implying, he said, carefully. That wasn't a denial. Again, not a denial, but you knew about my dad. Andrew pressed. Victor hesitated, just for a second, and that was enough. Yes, he said. The word landed like a bomb. Andrew staggered back slightly. You knew, he repeated. I stepped forward instinctively, my hand reaching toward him, but I stopped short. Because this moment, this realization had to be his. How? Andrew asked. Victor ran a hand over his face. For the first time, he looked tired. Not composed, not calculated, tired. I was involved in investigating some of the financial networks your father was connected to, he said. Andrew stared at him. So you were watching him? Not directly, Victor replied quickly. It was broader than that. But you knew who he was, Andrew said. Yes, and you knew who I was. Victor didn't answer. That's why you came into my life, Andrew said, the pieces falling into place. Victor shook his head. No, that's not why. Then why? Andrew demanded. Victor looked at him, and for the first time, there was no mask, no careful phrasing, no manipulation, just something raw, something complicated. Because I saw you, he said, quietly. Andrew frowned. What does that even mean? It means, Victor hesitated, searching for words. I saw a kid who had been left with questions no one was answering. A kid who deserved to understand what happened. That wasn't your place, I said firmly. No, Victor agreed. It wasn't. The admission surprised me. And it surprised Andrew, too. Then why didn't you just stay away? Andrew asked. Victor looked down for a moment, and when he looked back up, there was something different in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Regret. Because I thought I could help, he said. Andrew let out a shaky breath. Help, he repeated. By lying to me. I didn't lie, Victor said. You hid things, Andrew shot back. That's the same thing. The tension shifted again. Not toward me, not toward Victor, but toward the truth itself. I never intended to hurt you, Victor said quietly. Andrew laughed once. A short, broken sound. Well, you did, he said. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Completely. Andrew turned away from him, toward me. His eyes were filled with tears now. Confusion, pain, and something else, something fragile. Trust. Not fully restored, but beginning. Mom, he whispered. My heart clenched. I'm here, I said softly. He took a step closer, then another, until the distance between us was gone. I'm sorry, he said. The words broke something inside me. No, I said quickly. You don't have anything to be sorry for. I didn't believe you, he said. You had a reason not to, I replied gently. Because I had lied. Because I had hidden things. Because I had made it hard for him to trust me. I just didn't understand, he said. I know, I whispered. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I reached for him. And he didn't pull away. Behind us, Victor stood still, silent, watching, but no longer in control. Because this time, the truth had won. And for the first time, my son was finally back with me. The moment Andrew stepped toward me, something inside me finally loosened. Not completely, not enough to call it relief, but enough to breathe again. Because for the first time since this began, he wasn't standing beside Victor. He was standing beside me. I'm here, I repeated softly, my hand hovering near his shoulder. This time, I didn't hesitate. I gently pulled him into me, and he didn't resist. Andrew's body felt tense at first, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to feel safe yet. But after a second, he let go. Just a little, just enough for me to feel it. Behind us, Victor didn't move, but I could feel his presence, still, watching, calculating. Even now, I think you should both take a step back, Victor said finally. His voice had changed, less smooth, less controlled. still calm, but not in the same way. This wasn't the voice of someone in control anymore. This was someone trying to regain it. "No," Andrew said quietly. Victor blinked. "What?" "I said no," Andrew repeated stronger this time. I looked down at my son, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't seen since this started. Clarity. Not complete, not perfect, but real. "You don't get to tell us what to do anymore," Andrew continued. Victor's jaw tightened. "I'm not telling you what to do," he said. "I'm suggesting—" "No." Andrew interrupted again. "You've been doing that the whole time, suggesting things, guiding things, making it seem like it was my idea." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Victor didn't correct him. Andrew took a small step forward. Not aggressive, but deliberate. "I trusted you," he said. His voice cracked slightly, and I felt it like a physical pain in my chest. "More than I trusted my own mom," he added. Victor's expression flickered. Regret maybe, or maybe just the loss of control finally setting in. "I didn't mean for it to happen that way," Victor said quietly. Andrew shook his head. "But it did," he replied. "And you knew things about me about my dad that you never told me." Victor looked down briefly. "That's true," he admitted. The honesty came too late. Way too late. "So what was your plan?" Andrew asked. "Just stay in my life until I told you something, until I trusted you enough to give you whatever you were looking for." Victor's silence answered for him. I never knew anything I said, suddenly my voice rising. "I told you that. I still don't." Victor looked at me again, and this time, there was no softness left. "No," he said. "But you were the closest person to him." The words felt like a threat, and for the first time I realized some eating chilling. This wasn't over, not even close. Andrew felt it too. I could see it in the way his body stiffened again. "You're still doing it." "Andrew?" Said quietly. Victor frowned. "Doing what?" "Eating chilling." This wasn't over, not even close. Andrew felt it too. I could see it in the way his body stiffened again. "You're still doing it," Andrew said quietly. Victor frowned. "Doing what?" "Trying to make this about her," Andrew replied. "Trying to make it sound like she's the one hiding something." Victor opened his mouth to respond, but Andrew didn't let him. "No," he said firmly. "Not this time." Silence settled again. But this silence was different. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't tension. This was clarity. Hard, uncomfortable, but necessary. "We're leaving," Andrew said. Victor looked at him, long, careful, and then finally, he nodded. "All right," he said, just like that. No argument, no resistance, and somehow, that felt worse. Because it meant one thing. He wasn't done. He was just stepping back. "Andrew," Victor said as we turned toward the door. We both stopped, slowly. "If you ever want the full truth," he added, "you know where to find me." My entire body tensed. "No," I said immediately, but Andrew didn't answer. He didn't look at Victor. He didn't acknowledge the offer. And that gave me a small, fragile sense of hope. We walked out together. Without another word. The hallway felt different this time. Not like a place I was running through in panic, but like something we were finally leaving behind. Step by step. Together. When we reached the parking lot, Andrew stopped. "I don't want to go back inside," he said. "I know," I replied gently. He looked around as if seeing everything for the first time. "I can't believe I stayed here," he whispered. I didn't answer, because this wasn't the moment for judgment. This was the moment for understanding. "Do you want to go home?" I asked. He hesitated, and then nodded. "Yeah," he said. His voice was small again, but not broken, not like before. The drive home was quiet, but not the same kind of silence we had before. This silence wasn't a wall. It was space. Space to think, to process, to begin again. Halfway home, Andrew spoke. "Why didn't you tell me everything sooner?" he asked. The question hurt, but it was fair. "I was afraid," I admitted. "Of what?" I took a breath. "Of losing you," I said. He looked out the window. "And you almost did anyway." The words were soft, but they landed hard. "I know," I whispered, "and I'm sorry." We pulled into the driveway just as the sun began to set. The house looked the same, but everything about it felt different. Inside, Andrew paused near the door, like he wasn't sure if he still belonged there. That broke me, because this was his home. It always had been. "You don't have to decide anything right now," I said gently. He nodded. "Okay." That night we sat in the living room together, not talking much, but not avoiding each other either. Just being there. And for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Not relief, not yet, but hope. Because the truth had come out, the lies had been exposed. And even though everything wasn't fixed, we were finally on the same side again. But deep down, I knew something else. Victor hadn't fought us. He hadn't chased us. He hadn't tried to stop us. And people like him don't just walk away. So this wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every small sound in the house. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet shift of wind against the windows. And beneath all of it, the same thought kept repeating in my mind. Victor had let us walk away too easily. People like him don't just stop. They pause. They regroup. They wait. Around 3 a.m, I got up and walked quietly down the hallway. Andrew's door was slightly open. I stood there for a moment watching him sleep, or at least trying to sleep. He shifted restlessly, his face tense even in the dark. My chest tightened, because this was exactly what I had been trying to protect him from. Not just danger, but the weight of knowing. "I'm sorry," I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me. Sorry for the lies. Sorry for the truth. Sorry for everything in between. The next morning felt fragile, like everything we had rebuilt could still break if we moved too fast. Andrew sat at the kitchen table staring at a bowl of cereal he hadn't touched. I poured coffee, trying to act normal, but nothing about this was normal. "Do you think he'll come back?" Andrew asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I turned slowly. "What do you mean?" He shrugged slightly. "Like show up again, try to talk to me." I hesitated, because I didn't want to scare him, but I also couldn't lie again. "Yes," I said. Andrew nodded, like he had expected that answer. "Okay," he said quietly. Just that. No panic, no argument, just acceptance. "We'll handle it together," I added. He looked at me, and this time, there was no doubt in his eyes. "Together," he repeated. Later that afternoon, Carolyn came over. She sat across from us, her expression serious. "I've been digging deeper," she said. My stomach tightened. "What did you find?" She glanced at Andrew briefly, then back at me. "More connections," she said. "Victor wasn't just investigating your husband's network. He was involved in recovering missing funds." Andrew frowned. "What funds?" I closed my eyes briefly. "The money your father was accused of taking," I said. Andrew's jaw tightened. "So Victor thinks we have it?" Carolyn nodded. "Or that you know where it is," she said. "That's insane," Andrew said. "I know," I replied. "But the problem was, people like Victor didn't need proof. They needed opportunity." "There's more," Carolyn added. I braced myself. "What?" She pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Inside were documents, old records, bank statements, things I hadn't seen in years. "This was in your husband's file," she said. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, and then I froze. A name, an account, a location. "No," I whispered. Andrew leaned closer. "What is it?" I swallowed hard. "This account," I said slowly. "It was never closed." Carolyn nodded. "And it still has activity," she added. My heart started pounding. "That's not possible," I said. "It is," she replied. "And Jeffrey, it's recent." The room went silent. Andrew looked at me. "Mom, did you know about this?" I shook my head immediately. "No, I swear I didn't." And this time, I was telling the truth. "Then who's using it?" Andrew asked. That question hung in the air, heavy, unanswered. And then we all realized the same thing at the same time. Victor. "He didn't just come into our lives by accident," Carolyn said. "No," I whispered. "He came because he thought something was still here," Andrew added. I looked at him and saw it, the understanding, the clarity. "And now he knows we don't have it," Andrew said. "Maybe," Carolyn replied. "But that doesn't mean he's done." A chill ran through me, because she was right. If anything, this made things worse. "Then what do we do?" Andrew asked. I looked at him, at Carolyn, at the mess of truth we were sitting in, and I realized something. For the first time in all of this, we had something Victor didn't expect, the full picture. "We stop reacting," I said. They both looked at me. "What?" Carolyn asked. "We stop letting him control the situation," I explained. "No more waiting for him to make the next move." Andrew nodded slowly. "So, we make the first move." I met his eyes. "Yes." Carolyn leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" I took a deep breath. Because this wasn't just a plan. It was a risk. "We go to the police," I said. Andrew's eyes widened slightly. "And say what?" "The truth," I replied. "All of it." Carolyn hesitated. "That could bring attention to things you've been trying to keep quiet," she warned. "I know," I said. "But hiding it hasn't protected us." Andrew nodded. "She's right," he said. I looked at him, really looked, and saw something that made my heart ache. He wasn't the same boy anymore. He had changed, grown, forced to grow. "Okay," Carolyn said finally. "Then we do it right. We gather everything, every document, every connection. And we don't hold anything back," I added. Andrew took a deep breath. "Together," he said again. That word meant everything now. As the sun began to set again, I felt something shift. Not fear, not uncertainty. something stronger. Resolve. Because this time, we weren't running, we weren't hiding, and we weren't lying. And whatever Victor was planning next, we would be ready. But deep down, I couldn't shake one final thought. If the account was still active, if someone had been moving that money all this time, then this wasn't just about the past. It was still happening, and we were right in the middle of it. The police station felt colder than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. Like a place where truth didn't comfort you. It exposed you. Andrew sat beside me, his hands folded tightly in his lap, his knee bouncing just slightly. I noticed everything now. Every small movement, every breath, every shift in his expression. Because I almost lost him. And I wasn't going to miss anything again. "Jeffrey Morrison!" the officer called. I stood. "That's me." "This way." Andrew followed closely behind me as we were led into a small interview room. Plain walls, a metal table, 2 chairs. Nothing personal, nothing warm, just truth. "Start from the beginning," the detective said. And so I did. Everything. The lie I told Andrew years ago. My husband's hidden past. The missing money. Victor entering our lives. The patterns. The fear. The confrontation. Every detail I had once tried to bury, I laid out in the open. At some point, Andrew reached for my hand. I didn't look at him, but I held it tightly. When I finished, the room was quiet. The detective leaned back slightly, studying us both. "This is a lot," he said. "I know," I replied. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. Carolyn stepped forward. "I do," she said, placing the folder on the table. He opened it, flipped through it slowly. Carefully. "This account activity," he said, pointing at one of the pages. "You're saying you had no knowledge of this?" "No," I said firmly. "None." He looked at Andrew. "And you?" Andrew shook his head. "No." The detective nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll look into this. But if what you're saying is accurate, this isn't just a personal situation." I swallowed. I figured that. He closed the folder. "And Victor Hale?" he asked. I hesitated. "He's still out there," I said. The detective's expression hardened slightly. "Not for long," he replied. Those words should have made me feel better, safer. But they didn't. Not yet. Because I had learned something important. Safety doesn't come from someone else fixing your problems. It comes from facing them. When we left the station, the sun was setting again. Another day ending. But this time, it felt different. Andrew walked beside me in silence. Not distant, not withdrawn. Just thinking. "Mom," he said after a while. "Yes." He hesitated. "Why didn't you tell me the truth? Back then I knew this question would come. And I had promised myself no more hiding." "Because I was afraid," I said honestly. "Of what?" I looked at him. "Of losing you," I said. He frowned slightly. "But you almost did anyway." I nodded. "I know." We stood there for a moment, in the fading light. 2 people who had been through more than they ever should have. And somehow, were still standing. "I thought I was protecting you," I continued. "But I see now, I was also protecting myself." Andrew tilted his head slightly. "From what?" "From being seen differently by you," I admitted. "From you thinking I made the wrong choices. From you losing trust in me." He was quiet for a long time. And in me, he was quiet for a long time. And then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't lose my trust because you lied," he said. I looked at him surprised. "You lost it because you didn't let me understand." Then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't lose my trust because you lied," he said. I looked at him surprised. "You lost it because you didn't let me understand." The truth of that hit harder than anything else because it was simple and completely right. "I'm sorry," I said again. He nodded. "I know." We got into the car, and this time, when we drove home, it didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel broken. It felt open. A few days later, we got the call. Victor had been taken in for questioning. The account activity had led investigators to him. Transactions, connections, evidence. Not enough to close everything, but enough to start. "Will he go to jail?" Andrew asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. And that was the truth, because life doesn't always give you clean endings. But sometimes it gives you something better, a chance to heal. Weeks passed, then months. The house slowly became a home again. Not the same as before, but stronger, more honest, more real. Andrew started talking more, asking questions, even about his father. And this time, I answered. Every time. No matter how hard it was. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Andrew looked at me and smiled. Not the forced kind, not the careful kind, a real one. "I'm glad you told me the truth," he said. I smiled back. Me too. Because the truth didn't destroy us. It rebuilt us. And the lie I carried for so long, the one I thought would protect him, was never as strong as honesty. Not even close. We didn't get a perfect ending, but we got something better. We got each other. And this time, there were no secrets between us. Life has a way of putting us in impossible situations where every choice feels wrong and every path carries a cost. I believed for years that protecting someone meant shielding them from the truth, that if I carried the burden alone, my son would be safer. But I learned something much deeper. Love isn't about control. It's not about silence. And it's not about deciding what someone else can handle. Real love is about trust, about letting someone see the full picture, even when it's messy, even when it's painful. Because understanding builds strength, and truth builds connection. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to choose between protecting someone and being honest with them, what did you do? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and share your story. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own journey, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps more stories like this reach people who need them. You're not alone.